All right, go. Great. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Matt Green, co-chair of ACES, along with Josephine Ishman, also co-chair. Just going to go over our hybrid meeting policy here. So the Manhattan Community Board has adopted a hybrid meeting policy whereby we meet in person with remote option. All community board meetings will require an in-person quorum to come to order and conduct business. Committee members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability or an extraordinary circumstance as defined by the New York State Open Meetings Law. Excused committee members attending remotely can fully participate in the meeting and must leave their cameras on. Due to the public health best practices and space limitations, we encourage members of the public to join virtually. Members of the public that are attending remotely can fully participate in the meeting. The Community Board for Hybrid Policy can be found on our website, and tonight's meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube. So welcome again. On tonight's agenda, we have a few different presentations. We have Rachel from the Department of Education to talk about their annual Arts in the Schools report. We're joined by Nick from Education Through Music. And I believe ArtBridge is also on the agenda to give a presentation on one of their upcoming arts projects on Penn South, and then we'll open it up to new business. Before we start with our first meeting agenda item, just wanted to open it up to any comments from the public, anything to raise before we start on our first agenda item. Okay, seeing none, why don't we start with Rachel from the Department of Education. Rachel, I hope you can hear us. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We look forward to hearing from you and more about the annual arts report. So I hand it over to you. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me. I was looking to see if I could put a link in the chat, but I cannot. I was going to share a link with everybody that has the Department of Education's Arts Office website, where all of the information that I'm going to share with you can be found. So I don't have like a presentation per se. I'm just going to speak, and I will get the link to Jesse, who can share it with everybody after this. That is where all links and registration and anything that I'm about to talk about can be found there. So I'm not exactly sure how far back I should start, because I'm not sure where people's knowledge is on this topic, but I'll give a generalization, and apologies if you already know this. The Central Arts Office serves all 5 boroughs. We are an office of roughly 30 people. We serve from 3K through 12, every single public school in all of the boroughs. We support with visual arts, with dance, with theater, and with music, and also increasingly with moving image. We have a lot of dance teachers. We work very closely with principals. We work closely with superintendents to basically provide as many and as varied and as high quality arts experiences as we possibly can for the students that are attending our schools. There are a variety of ways that these experiences are delivered. Some of it is through licensed arts teachers that are hired by principals and work in the school. Some of it is through cultural partners, some of whom I see that you'll hear from later that we work with as well. A lot of the ways that arts are delivered is a combination of budget and knowledge and enrollment and all of these factors. Recently, as of last year, there's a new executive director of the Arts Office. His name is Paul Thompson. And under his leadership, we are doing a lot of work looking into the data of our programs, our longstanding historic programs, with an eye towards equity. We've done this work a lot in the past, and we're continuing to do it more. So we're really trying to make sure that arts education across all disciplines are available to as many children as possible. It is their right, after all. And one of the newer initiatives is something that we are trying to address, which has been a very, very long-standing challenge for parents, which is the idea of articulation within a given art form across schools. So it's common that a student may have an arts experience from their 3K, pre-K through 5th grade elementary school with, let's say, a visual arts teacher and a music teacher in the building. They then leave that school to go to middle school, and there's no particular guarantee. And up until this point, no, the data is out there, but it's not organized in a way that is useful to, from a parent or a child's point of view, be able to figure out how they can then find a middle school that has music and arts so they can continue their education in those particular genres. The same goes for dance and theater, and the same goes from the switch from 8th grade into 9th grade. So one of the big initiatives that we are working on now is identifying these pathways, which have to be done almost on a per teacher basis, right? Like we really have to dig down into what exact art forms are being taught in every single school, which we know, and then looking at what kind of patterns there are when those students leave 5th grade and move on to 6th grade, or when those students leave 8th grade and move on to 9th grade, and be able to provide parents and communities at large the knowledge so that if a child would like to continue their visual arts study from K to 12, they have the knowledge of where to go in order to do that. So that is one of the big new initiatives that we're working on. Coming up this year in the spring marks the 10th year anniversary of the Borough Arts Festivals. These are actually started by Chancellor Farina, which is a number of chancellors ago. And she wanted to create a borough-wide arts celebration at the end of the year. Often these things are done on the school level, sometimes on the district level, but very rarely had it ever been historically done on a borough level. And so that is my project. That's what I've been doing for 10 years. We will celebrate again in May at MoMA, Coleman Education Center. It's the wing of MoMA, the education wing. They've been our longtime partners for Manhattan. And then that's for visual arts. Performing arts takes place at the Apollo Theater, which will be our 10-year anniversary. And it's an application that any arts teacher in Manhattan is welcome to apply. We have an extensive process whereby we collect applications, we look at the art forms, we look at videos of the performance, and then it's adjudicated by a panel. And we usually have about 350 to 400 student performers at Apollo, and we showcase about 125 pieces of visual art, 2D, 3D, and moving image at MoMA.
Wow.
I'm going to pause there and see if there's questions. I just said a lot of stuff, so maybe there's a way to take questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Appreciate that info. Did you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Rachel. I have a question. You had said that the art programs in school were based on many factors, including enrollment and budget. So could you talk about that a little bit, especially if some of our schools may be facing under-enrollment, or budget, is this coming out of the principal's budget? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
It's always been this way, right? So we had Project Arts, which was an initiative a long time ago that no longer exists, but for many, many years, the budgets are under the principal's control. However, budget is linked to student enrollment, right? We know that it's a number of dollars per student with a lot of other factors around Title I, Title III. There's a lot of things that define what that number is, but the smaller the school, roughly you can say the smaller the budget. And so within the framework, that is the reality, we, the Arts Office, worked very closely together with our cultural partners, with the principals, with the superintendents, with like CBOs, and we make plans that work for each individual building so that they can provide the arts education that they need to.
Okay, so that's great. So a principal could reach out to you all if they wanted some support.
That's like large portions of my day are spent talking with principals. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Katie?
Yeah, hey, hi, my name is Katie Stokes. I'm one of the committee members. This was super helpful, and I know how valuable it is to families to be able to have arts in the school. And you were talking about the program where you're going to be tracking if kids have had certain arts in the elementary school, then how can they find middle schools where they could pursue that? But, and you said that the data isn't so clean or so perfect yet. and
Well,
you're working
no,
on
it's
that.
more that the data is there. It's never been organized in this way. So it's just, we need somebody to pull it all together, but all the data exists. It's just in
Okay.
different pockets or in
Yeah.
different places kind of thing.
Yeah. So I wondered, is there data that is organized? Like, can somebody look at the data and say, okay, well, I'm making up a number, in 80% of elementary schools, at least art is offered, or in 100% of elementary schools, this thing is offered. I mean, because I found myself wondering, if the focus is on making sure that if kids start at an elementary school, that they may be able to find it in middle school or high school, might that be taking the focus away from making sure that at least every elementary school has certain offerings? Do you know what I mean?
I do. I understand what you mean, but I'm not concerned about that for the following reasons. First of all, there's the requirements for arts instruction are state level, not city. We follow state law and state seat time requirements for the arts. And in an elementary school, which the state defines as K through 6th grade, actually, I don't know why, but it's K through 6th, and then 7th through 8th are banded, and then 9 through 10. So from K to 6, arts instruction can be offered by either a licensed art teacher, right? So somebody who went to school and has a music license, or a cultural partner from whom we're going to hear in a little bit. So an organization that brings a teaching artist into the building, or by classroom teachers who wish to do arts within the school day of their regular second grade classroom. So there's a lot of entry points, and there's a number of ways that arts are delivered. We have to be aware of quality, and that's something that our office, we look at and we talk about, and we try to make sure that's happening. But I don't think that the two things are at odds. If anything, it's the opposite, because through the work of identifying these pathways, we will have to get so granular in our knowledge of what art forms are taking place in which buildings, and even more so, like, drilled down to, like, is it choral? Is it instrumental? Is it, what kind of theater? We will have to know that data so much that we will then be able to create probably opportunities that were there, but nobody knew about once we actually get the data put together. So I actually think it's going to serve everybody in the way that it will increase opportunities. It's not going to pull from one to get into the other.
Well, that's super helpful. Okay, thank you. And just a follow up to that. So when you say that the requirements are set by the state for arts time, and does that mean that it's a pretty general requirement, right? Like every kindergartner, whatever, has to have so much arts.
It's minutes. You can go on NYSED, you can go on New York State ED department. It's literally like this many minutes of this instruction. It's for everything, not just arts. That's how all academics are dictated.
But it sounds like but arts could be, like, in some school, it could be painting, in another school it could be choral, in another school it could be piano lessons. Is that right? Like, it's a pretty big definition of arts. Is that right?
Without boring everybody to death about, like, the details of the state regs, which is really not fun to know, but broadly, from a younger age, the requirements, as you get older, the requirements kind of narrow in a triangle, right? Like, so the expectations of schools of our younger students are that they are getting exposure and education in all genres, in visual art, in theater, in dance, and in music. As they get older, with the knowledge that balance of academics and seat time requirements shift, it gets less and less, the number of minutes and the requirements of which art forms are looser. So by the time you get to high school, it's literally just one semester of 1 year in high school as you get up, as the older you get. Okay, so that data is publicly available, and if you really like want to go down a real rabbit hole, go for it. It's not super fun reading, but it's all out there. It's all in state policy. Yeah.
Great, super helpful. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Any other questions from the committee? Rachel, is there anything else as part of your presentation that you would like to share with us? I know you mentioned that there was a link. I assume that's to the annual report.
No, the annual report, I was actually going to give a link to the Arts Office website, which has all kinds of it's really houses everything that we do. There's a ton of programs that we offer that I didn't go into today. We have citywide orchestra that still exists. There's band, there's all kinds of things that we do. And the easiest way to learn about all of that is to look on the website. The Arts and Schools report is also on there as one of the many things that we do.
Got it. And is there anything as like a community board that, I know you mentioned you do you have a whole system in place to collect applications for artists, for teacher artists to submit sort of student work, and they can put that on, showcase that. Are there things that we could do to help with that outreach to some of our local schools? Are there certain things that you all are doing that we could do as a community board to help sort of support, just programming in our schools?
Yes. And I need to think about what that would be, but I'm always going to say, yes, there are things for people to do to help. I want to, give a little thought about exactly how that would work, but absolutely 100%. We rely a lot on community, and I don't know if any of you are parents of children in these local schools, but yeah, I mean, if you are a parent, you know that schools absolutely rely on the partnership and support that parents can provide. So I've never been asked that question before, which is why I don't have a stock answer for you, but the answer is yes, and let me think about it and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, many of us are, parents of children in our public school system or of children who went through the public school system. So we would love to continue to, work with you in the conversation and figuring out ways that we can work together. So
happy to do that. This is actually the first time I've been asked to join one of these meetings, so I'm happy to do it. It always has to get run through Central, but thanks for finding me and reaching out, and I'm glad to sort of share this information.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rachel. We'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so next on our agenda is education through music. Hi, Nick. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Can you hear us? Yes. Hi. Excellent. So, Nick, take it away.
Okay, so thank you for having us, and thank you for your interest in education through music. I understand that things that are of interest are the schools that we serve in your community board district, which is Hudson High School. We have only one school in your district. I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. And I also understand that you might be interested in hearing a little bit about our workforce development initiative and work, which is actually very related to what Rachel Shapiro was just talking about. We live very much in the same environment. And of course, I can give a quick overview of who ETM is and what we do. So where would you like me to begin?
Yeah, why don't you give a brief background on ETM as an organization, some of the work that you do locally here in Community Board 4, and then, yeah, we would love to hear about the workforce development program.
Okay, so we'll go in that order. I do have a little bit of a presentation here I can share if I'm allowed to share a screen. Should I go ahead and do that?
Yes, you can do that, Nick.
Okay. So, all right. Let's see here if this works out.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, let me get it into presentation mode here. Okay. So here we go. So we start with the understanding that in New York City, there's a great lack of arts instruction in schools. In fact, among New York City schools, only 54% have a licensed music teacher, although some have other, as we've just learned from Rachel, some have other disciplines, visual art, dance, what have you. But there is a great need for music teachers, and that is where we fit in. So here's our mission and vision. To summarize it, we're looking to help schools repatriate, rebuild high quality music programs to impact student self-confidence, attendance, performance, and all the things that we know from studies and also intuitively that music education will do as part of a well-rounded education. Okay, sorry. Oops, okay. So our here we've been around for 33 years. We've got some really wild stats here, 8 million hours of music instruction. So the way that gets calculated is if we're in 50 schools for the entire school year, for example, this year we have 18,000 students among all our 50 schools. We see each student on a weekly basis. And when you add up all those hours, you get some really big numbers. And this is what that's all about. I guess it just highlights the fact that what we do is very in-depth, and we really integrate into the schools so that we are really impacting each student in the schools that we are in, because we see them all year long on a weekly basis as a regular core curricular weekly special, which is standard for what music education typically looks like in the schools. So here's a little bit about what we do. We work with every student in the building we're in. We build curriculum. We base it on state, local, and national standards. We don't reinvent the wheel, but we take best practices from all the above, and we customize it for New York City to make it culturally relevant and impactful. And long-term is our project is to help, I say, repatriate music programs back into city schools, where the principal will hire our teacher after the first year or two, depending on lots of external factors, including budget and other things. But that's the long-term goal, is to get our teachers hired back, repatriate music programs back into New York City schools. So as I mentioned, this year we're in 50 schools, 18,000 students served. That's on a weekly basis. And here's the stats. All of our schools are Title I. Poverty levels of our schools are 86% as a whole on average. New York City is 70% students of poverty. But since we're in Title I only, we have a higher percentage. And there's some other stats there. All right, so I guess I'll pause there quickly. If there's any questions about our organization, I can answer those before jumping into our work at Hudson High School.
Actually, can I say,
Yeah.
and just real quickly, can you give us an approximate breakdown of like how many elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools you serve? Like, is it primarily one or the other?
Yeah, good question. I don't have that off the tip of my tongue, but yes, we have more elementaries then the next biggest group is middle schools, then high schools. So I think right now we probably have something like 35 elementaries, 10 middles, and maybe 4 or 5 high schools among the 50. So it's sort of like that generalizes a little bit, but it's pretty close.
I think Katie brings up a really good point. I just want to follow up on that. Is there any reason, do you feel that high schools, because Rachel was telling us earlier as well, it does seem to dwindle down, because even at my daughter's school is the same thing. So is there any reason why high schools tend to have less music programs than the other elementary and middle?
I don't know for a fact that high schools have fewer music teachers on average than elementaries or middles, or middles less than elementary. I know we're in fewer schools of those schools.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm not sure what the overall stats are for that, so I really couldn't say. You could be right. I'm not sure about that. I think it may be, if I was to just take a guess, I think that music, movement, singing, is really sort of, people see that as foundational for children of the age of elementary school, I'm guessing. So there's maybe a greater need among parents, maybe a greater level of engagement among parents that demand that. And that could be why that happens, but that's a guess. I'm not sure.
All right, sorry. Go ahead.
And can I just ask, sorry, one last question. Can you just tell us a little bit about your funding? Like, is it private funding, grants, or how you? Where
Oh,
your money
yes,
comes?
sure. So we have funding from a whole variety of sources, not uncommon for a nonprofit in New York City. So Department of Cultural Affairs funds us. We have a variety of foundations that fund us. We work a lot on our, individual donor campaigns. So government, we do a lot of work on, getting local government, elected official funding. So I think we sort of tap every area that we feel like, there's an interest and support for what we do.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I think we can keep going.
Great. So Hudson High School, this is our second year of partnership at Hudson High School. We serve about 135 of their students per week. I think they're around 240 population size total for the 9 through 12. So we serve a good portion of those. There's some demographics there for you. So we do music for 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students this year. It can vary year to year depending on Principal Wilson. Michael Wilson is the principal. So every year we have a planning meeting about the coming year, decide sort of how he wants to use the curriculum to sort of benefit what he's got going on at the school. This year it's 9th, 10th, 11th. And this school has really followed the ETM model closely because, and that's a full-time teacher, as I noted there. He came to us as sort of an early career teacher, not certified yet. And we supported him through the certification process. He became certified this year. And our goal is for him to be hired at the school, which is the completion of our model. As I said, repatriating music programs back into schools, helping create those positions, and then help our teachers step into them, and the school gets the sustainable program. So we're on track for that. These things are often, as I mentioned, impacted by external factors. So we'll meet with Principal Wilson, as I do with all principals, in the May-June timeframe and figure out what our game plan is for the coming year. So curriculum components, a lot of music technology. We work on student compositions. Guitar and drumming are also sort of cornerstones of the curriculum that we are running at Hudson. Any questions about that?
Seeing none.
I will quickly mention that, one of the things Rachel was talking about is, so students, in elementary or middle, so what if they really get into an art form and find success, find engagement in school, feel like they're good at something, feel like they really are progressing and developing, and then they get to the next, be it middle school or high school, and it's not there. So for a place like Hudson High School, what I'm always thinking about is, wait a minute, who are the feeder schools? What's happening in those middle schools? And then, by extension down to the elementaries, because when we have a student in elementary that is finding success in what they do, then we really want them to be able to continue that success. That's really half the battle, because a child develops, until they're 18 years old, they're children, or 16, whatever, but, we need to keep supporting them. So building those feeder networks are really, really high on our priority. So here's some stats about needs of teachers. Nationally, there's a teacher shortage. New York City has one as well. Moving on. So a little bit about our workforce development. So by nature, the work we do is workforce development, because we take teachers that are typically or often not certified. Maybe they've got degrees in performance, maybe they're gigging, maybe they're active musicians of some type, and do some teaching perhaps, or not, but they want to sort of develop in that direction. So we are a good place for that type of individual. And what we do is a whole host of training, mentoring, curriculum development, and support to help them find success in New York City classrooms teaching music. So that's sort of the nature of what we do. And we offer like 100 hours professional development. We offer some great big trainings the last 2 weeks of August. We do lots of trainings throughout the year. Lots of observation feedback of all the teachers that we have. Each teacher has a supervisor and a mentor that takes care of them, reviews their lesson plans, helps them address all of the types of teacher challenges that happen, that, you know, they encounter in a classroom. That's really our role. And then obviously that end game is to get them hired into the New York City schools. So by nature, there's the workforce development piece. However, what we've recently started, based largely on a grant that we received, a 5-year grant to help us with this, is to underpin that work is to develop another level of support, which is our intern program. So here's a little bit about that. So these are teachers who may not be ready for the classroom to just go jump in right away, but you know, show some promise and show some interest, and we feel like they're good candidates. And we're bringing them into our 14-week internship program. We have 3 interns starting this spring, and we're going to expand that. We intend to expand that to 8 interns next year. And these are teachers that often we might have hired because of the teacher shortage. Sometimes we hire teachers that we feel, you know, show promise, but they're maybe not totally ready. But we know we bring them on because we have faith that we can help them. But this provides an even better place for them to really get their feet wet and get up to speed with things. So that's sort of the idea behind the internship program. I'll pause there for a second to see if there's any questions.
Okay.
So that's sort of the in a nutshell, that's what we're up to in terms of our workforce development. And here's obviously the contact information. I'm just wondering if I sort of touched on the things that you may have been interested in, or if there's something else you wanted to hear about in terms of the work we do.
Oh, I mean, I think it's great. I did have one other question. Since this is music, like, you know, I saw you had pictures of keyboards and all of that. And if you're going into a school that has no instruments, do you guys bring that with you, or how does that work?
Yes.
It's expensive, so, yeah.
Sure. So we have various ways of funding that piece of our programming, those instruments and supplies. So I describe it to principals as a shared cost. So we work with the school based on whatever they have available in their budget. Often they do have budget lines that they can use for this. I often feel like, you know, for example, to outfit an elementary school classroom is about $8,000 to get them the basic tools that the teacher will need to conduct their curriculum and run those general music classes for elementary. That includes things like recorders, bean bags, colored scarves, shakers, hand drums, xylophones, you know, a great big 30-square color-coded rug, piano for the teacher, ukuleles, that type of thing. It's very choral based, a lot of movement. For the elementary, for the middle school and the music technology piece and the high school, secondary, it gets closer to $15,000. But we find that often principals have a good chunk of that they can use for that purpose. And then we have certain grants that also help us with that.
We have one member online who would like to ask a question. Leslie?
Thanks. Thank you, Josephine. Nick, thank you so much. I have a question. I don't know if you'll know this, but a big problem we have with arts education in our public schools is that a lot of the schools, mostly elementary schools, who get good art education is because it's funded or supplemented by PTA funds, right? It's PTAs who could raise that money, and then they bring in these outside elements. Would you know this? Would you know the percentage of your programs that kind of get those PTA funds, or is it supplemented by DOE? I don't know if you would know that. You just know you get the funds from the school. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I have some familiarity there. Possibly because our schools are all Title I. We don't see a great deal of financial support from the parent communities, although there are a couple of cases where the parent communities got together to fund the after-school program, which is a couple of $1,000s for the year. So that does happen, but from my experience, a vast majority of our schools pay for us through their Title I funding, and they pay straight from their own budget. And you know, we work with schools for whom this is a big priority because they're ultimately wanting to hire a teacher. So they're looking at this as a big investment, and it's an investment for, on all sides, really. But that's what I've seen with funding from our partner schools.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we got another question, Nick. Katie?
Yeah, just, you mentioned that your model is to send in a licensed teacher or someone who's working on becoming certified, have them work there for a couple of years and then hopefully be hired. Can you tell us sort of what the track record is? Does that model typically work? Like are 80% of your teachers that you send in then hired, or how has it worked?
Sure. Over the past, I'll give you a couple different stats that sort of imply different things, but over the past 12 years, we've had, I think, 67 or 68 teachers hired into New York City schools. Prior to COVID, we were getting pretty reliably between 15 and 25% of our teachers hired each year. So that's changed a little bit. It's gone down. That average has gone down since post-COVID, and it's been really up and down for the past 2-3 years. There was the year after first year COVID hit, 0 teachers got hired. So it's sort of like a roller coaster with the DOE and the school budgets every year. You never know. I know that there's principals that really want to hire teachers and sometimes can't, because I have one principal that I spoke to a couple days ago. Because there's some budget snafu in his situation, the school is actually taking back $200,000 from next year's budget because they say he owes it. So he's devastated he can't hire the teacher that he has now because he really likes her. It's a middle school in Brooklyn. So these things happen all the time. It's really so many moving pieces in this environment with DOE and the bureaucracy.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I wondered if you were having funding challenges or if the schools are having funding challenges because of the cuts and things recently, and if that impacted you. So
yeah, there's all kinds of worries and news. And I do ask principals. I've had mid-year check-in meetings with most of my principals at this point. And I asked them that question. I said, what have you heard specifically from city or state or DOE about your budget next year? And none of them have said anything definite. They just say, well, there's talk. We're not sure yet. And, a lot of times they really don't know until late May. They get a first glimpse at their budget, and it's not confirmed until like July 1st. And they never are sure until then. And then even then, sometimes things, you hear curveballs and whatnot. So that's the way it goes.
You all are doing great work. We could literally use like 20 more. Because as Leslie brings up a very good point, because not just the music teachers, but instruments, all of that. I know that you're based in Title I schools, but for other schools that can raise those kind of funds, they have these programs. And obviously there's only so many Title I schools you can cover. But you're doing great work. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really been my pleasure to present to you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, moving right along. I think our next agenda item is Art Bridge. Is that Brenda?
Rebecca.
Rebecca, I'm sorry. Hi, Rebecca. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen and quickly give you, where is this one? And give you an overview of what ArtBridge does, who we are, and give you a sneak peek of what we're bringing to your district, hopefully at the end of this month. So this is a boring slide, and I'm just gonna click right through it so you can look at some artwork while I'm talking. ArtBridge, we are a nonprofit. We serve mostly all 5 boroughs of New York City. We were founded in 2008. So I'm just gonna check the time. I don't want to take too long here. We were founded in 2008 by Rodney Durso, who's a designer and artist, when he was like, you know what, there's scaffolding on my building. Can I just put art on it? Wouldn't that be more delightful to look at than our, you know, ubiquitous green painted plywood sheds, which have been, you know, that's the color they have to be painted. So he started putting up artwork, you know, without permits, and did that for a few years. And then finally, after many, many years, we finally, in October of 2023, got local law 163 codified. So now we have legal permits to place art on construction sheds. So these are ground level sheds, elevated sheds, construction fencing. And that's what ArtBridge does. We use these construction sites as canvases for artwork. Our main goal is to bring local artists to local sites. So much of what we do is create open calls for community members to submit their artwork, or research artists who have lived in or done a lot of developing their art practice in certain neighborhoods. So I'll just dive into my slides to give you a sense for how this happens all over the city. So what we're looking at is an installation by the artist Zihan Wazed, who's a Queens-born artist who has this installation in Astoria, Queens. This was a partnership with the Durst organization, which is a developer. ArtBridge partners with developers. We have a large program in public housing, which I'll show you. And then we also partner with nonprofits. So Zihan started developing his own mural. And then there is the New York City Public Housing Development, Astoria House is right next door to this property. And we had partnered with them a few years back. So Zihan started, went to the community center there and realized that there are dance classes. And so he asked if he could partner with the kids in the dance class to make a virtual reality video, and then imagery from that got placed into this artwork. I don't have, so if you go to this site and you take your phone and you put, you know, you take your QR code, you're gonna see these kids start dancing. And this is an example of artwork that was created digitally and printed onto PVC board and then placed over the green construction sheds. And I'll just zoom through a bit quickly. We did a partnership on the Upper East Side with Lenox Hill Hospital. This is an artwork by Ebony Bolt. This was created in 2021, so during our experience of the pandemic. It was an open call to the community board 12 vetted a number of applicants. They picked Ebony along with one other artist, Naomi Lawrence, who has another installation. And this work was also placed onto ground level sheds, except this time the artwork is printed onto vinyl and then affixed to the ground level construction shed. And then I'm going to show you some of our installations we've done in public housing. Imara Moore did workshops with residents at South Beach houses in Staten Island. This is an amalgam of photographs with imagery of the landscape around the houses, and that's an elevated shed. Again, it's vinyl that's printed and put on these elevated sheds. There's Blanca Amiscua, who did a piece at the Mitchell houses in the Bronx. Caroline Marduk did a collaboration with PS15 in Red Hook Initiative, and Red Hook Art Project. And then she created this incredible streetscape, bringing imagery from historic imagery and then photographs of community members into this elevated shed. And also in Red Hook, we had some artists who wanted to use other materials. So they're using acrylic and figured out how to create a sculpture on the fencing. So now I want to talk about where we've intersected with your neighborhood. We've worked with Google a number of times. We've brought in artists to paint directly on the scaffolding shed. There's some artists who paint on, well, this is, you can see the artist is using spray paint on the elevated shed. There's some artists who paint onto polytab, which is a material that you can paint on and then affix to the shed. And then here's another image of printing onto PVC board, putting it on the construction here. This was a collaboration with the Children's Museum of Art in Manhattan, the artist Tamashi Jackson, and Google. And then more directly, we did a collaboration with Chelsea, Elliott, and Fulton Houses, and brought in a local resident, Maria Lupianez, and who collaborated with Hisham Barucha, an artist who lives in Greenpoint, and they did portraits of residents at all three of the New York City public housing developments right in this area. So we are close to installing a mural at Penn South. The way the Penn South partnership came about is that they reached out to us and said, you know, we're doing some construction around our playground. It's Sandbox Playground, which is on 8th Avenue between 26th and 27th Streets. And they wanted to do an open call to bring an artist in to bring some, you know, brightness to the area while the space is under construction. And in response to the open call, a resident of Penn South applied, and he actually ended up being chosen. And this is you guys, this is the first sneak peek. We haven't widely publicized this yet, but it has been announced to the co-op board. So this is Joseph Malloy, who is a resident of Penn South. His kids play in the playground, and this is the design that was landed upon after a few back and forths around imagery. And that's it. So overview, I can answer any questions you have and delve in more into any topic.
Thanks so much, Rebecca.
Sure.
We'll open it up to questions from committee members. Charlie?
Thanks for the presentation. I really love the work that you guys are doing. I'm curious, it seems like you found good partners in Penn South and public housing and Google. What about scaffolding that's up with a building that is probably going to not be a good partner? And I say that because there's a derelict building next to a playground on 47th Street in our district that there's no end in sight for that scaffolding. It's been up for years. There's currently illegal advertising, wheat pasted all over the scaffolding. And it would be a great opportunity there's a school next door for you know, children to put some art up there for some kind of art project, but I'm very skeptical that talking to the landlord would be fruitful. But maybe your organization could help with that.
Yeah, that is an issue we've come across. In order to place art on a site, we do have to be in partnership with the owner of the building. If there is a way to come together as a community board, as ArtBridge, to make a pitch, you know, that's something that could be looked into. What it really comes down to is who's going to pay for it. When we partner with developers, they're the ones paying for it. You know, when we partner with NYCHA, we have a line of funding through NYCHA. We do put in for discretionary funding in various districts. Of course, we get DCLA funding, etc. But there has to be buy-in from the developer. So there's got to be a good reason that they'd want to get in on it. How would it benefit them?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How does it work with the scaffolding companies? Because years ago, I was told by someone who actually owned the scaffolding company that each scaffolding company has a different color where they put the scaffolding up. It's a way of identifying. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, so many years ago, there was a law that said scaffolding actually has to be painted this hunter green that we see. So that was that law. So all companies, aside from these new umbrella ones that are popping up, which you probably noticed, which look like more Gothic arches, and they have kind of like a mesh looking white metal. Everything else, if it's wood panel, has to be painted green. And so this new legislation gives us the ability to put our artwork on that green.
Any other questions?
That's okay.
Did you have one?
No.
Okay. Leslie?
Thank you, Rebecca. Just curiosity. I know it's to scale and everything, but how much do these cost?
Great
What are the
question.
costs?
Yeah, Definitely depends on scale, material, and who we're working with. Our main priority is that we pay the artists equitably. So if we're looking at 100 feet of scaffolding, that's 100 linear feet, that's going to be 8 feet high by 100 feet long, and they're going to do a digital image on vinyl. Let's say average $6,000 for the artist, but then you have to add production costs, and of course, ArtBridge maintaining its ability to do this work. So the reality is, depending on scale, projects can cost anywhere from like 10,000 to 60,000. Depends on the specifics of the project.
The reason why I asked is because Charlie brought up a really good point. If, you know, you have something that's unsightly, and like, how can we kind of get the landlord or whoever's in charge of that plot of land to cooperate, and like, what would the costs be? So I was just curious about the costs and
Yeah.
if it could be negotiated in some way, but so thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any, on the Department of Building side, so local law was passed, so you're allowed to do this work. Is there any other permitting issues that the landlord would be responsible of, or once, like, how, can you just maybe take us through that process? Like how, how somebody would actually start the work?
Sure. So ArtBridge takes care of all of the permitting, and we have to get permitting through Department of Buildings, which we submit for, and we also have to do it through Department of Cultural Affairs. They are the ones who ultimately will sign off on the design. And there's stipulations regarding that. You know, there can't be any text. You can't be, the subject matter has to be acceptable for a large public audience. But ArtBridge is set up to deal with each part of that, including contacting the scaffolding company, getting insurance for installation. And then there's conversations around maintenance. Who's going to cover those costs? Is that will be ArtBridge, or, you know, but when it comes to the site owner, you know, if we put in permits and everything, there shouldn't be any violations that we would assume to occur. Yeah.
Got it. And when is the, on Penn South, that project, when do you anticipate that? Is that underway currently? Is that?
So our hope, pending one thing with DOB that we're working on right now, is that we can begin painting at the end of March. So it'll be a hand painted mural. Might take 2 weeks, and we're talking with Penn South about, you know, having days where folks can come and watch the artist work, that kind of thing. So I can keep you up to date on that.
Great.
Yeah, I have one more question. So I'm just curious, what happens to the artwork when the scaffolding comes down? It's so expensive. Is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So depending on conversation before the art goes up, if it's hand painted on panel or on polytab, there can be conversations around who gets to keep that work. Is it going to be resold, or is it going to be given to the community to put in another space? When it comes to vinyl, there's the option of recycling the vinyl so that the work can be made into bags, or there's just a reuse. I've had a lot of folks who work in gardens approach us to ask if they could have the vinyl just to like place on their beds and use it for weeding, or as a way to just put new soil down. So yeah, all different ways. Each project we do is unique. So there's no one solution or one answer.
Jesse, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi Rebecca. I thought also, tell me if I'm wrong, didn't you guys do the fencing or the around the Hudson River Tunnel project that Amtrak is doing on 29th Street? Wasn't that you guys as well, or is that someone else?
I think that was someone else. 29th.
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right, my mistake. I thought that was you guys. All right.
Unless I don't know, because maybe I just it's my yeah, not that I'm aware of. I've been here for 2 years, so I don't know that.
Okay.
Cool. Anybody else? Have any questions?
Just one minor question. Do you take ideas for new locations on a rolling basis, or do you open up like certain windows of time?
We're always open for anyone to approach us with ideas. And when we do open calls with partners, we'll publicize that. Whether it's, you know, open to any New York or neighborhood or community specific, we'll publicize that.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions. We really appreciate the presentation, Rebecca, and look forward to seeing the art up at Penn South soon. So keep us posted on when you think that will begin, and we'll definitely stop by and check it out and keep up the great work.
Great, thank you. I'll let you know when we get to put paint to board, hopefully soon. Okay, thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was our last presentation for the evening, although now we can talk about any new business that anyone would like to bring up. Agenda topics that we should consider. Does anybody have?
Well, I was wondering, last week, all of a sudden I realized, like, you know, we had talked about, we've asked for certain things in the past, and then I just didn't know if we had any updates about it, or if we should invite people back to tell us what's happening. But, you know, we had talked about the English language, the ESL in the, for our migrants, you know, in the hotels. And there had been the one program that I think they were doing it like in one place or two places, right?
DYCD.
Yeah.
Was under the DYCD.
And then we've written a letter saying like, we hope that that'll be continued and maybe expanded, but I would love to know sort of what's happening there. And we'd also just sort of talked about like, how great it would be or could be if there were after-school programs or some sort of programming in the hotels or for the kids who are living there. And I don't know if it's Iris or somebody else who could come tell us about that, but I think those are two areas that I'd love to hear more about.
No, I think those are great points. A lot of well, as far as I know, the ESL were in the HERC shelter. So those
That's
were,
right. Mhm.
those were, what do they call them? Not safe havens. There's another word for it. Sanctuaries. So basically, when they opened up, they were different from regular shelters. They were sanctuaries, so there was no telling how long the families would be there. Basically, they would be there as long as they needed to get settled. And then we got the 60-day notice situation. So I would imagine that 60-day has affected these programs. We could certainly follow up with the HERPs and see what's happening.
And also find out, I mean, I think we had said, I mean, it's great that it's in the HERPs, but wouldn't it be lovely if it were in other places too, right? And I just don't have a sense. And I remember, wasn't it Robin Forster or somebody, I think from the mayor's office, who'd said like, well, yeah, it's really great to hear about that. Wouldn't that be, but maybe we could invite her to come learn with us, whether or not anything has been happening there or sort of what needs to be done.
I feel like I get my sense with those shelters like Cassia, and there's several different ones. And since they're all run by different organizations, they kind of do their own thing. So, yeah, like.
Well, yeah, I certainly remember when we raised that DYCD's point was that unlike the HERC shelters,
Right.
that the people move in and out so quickly in the sort of standard DSS shelters that the programming doesn't, like, there's very hard to keep the programming static with so many people moving so quickly. But I mean, we can definitely follow up with DYCD, find out what is the status of the program, because it was a sort of a pilot, so it'd be great. And we did add it to our budget. Budget priorities.
Because one of the directors, I think it was Cassia, had explained that, you know, their whole goal in that type of shelter is to get people to move on to the next step. So they're to find housing. Basically, that is the entire goal, is to find housing. These other programs, if you can get them, great. If not, you know, whereas the HERPs, it was more about getting settled in New York City, learning the language, just different kind, but now that's a 30-day, I mean, a 60-day tenure, so that's all changed too. So I'm affecting that, but yeah, we can absolutely follow up on that. Yes.
Last year I was working offline, maybe I can get the group to work with this committee to work. I was working with actually, who came to our committee, Leslie Woodrow. And then she was gonna work with me about getting kids to go to the United Nations, because they used to go to the United Nations, to take tours as kids. So I thought maybe we can do some in Spanish and some in English and get the tours. I actually spoke with someone from the United Nations Association, with the New York chapter. And this woman I forgot about it, and this woman went to another school. I spoke to Leslie Murphy a little bit about it too. But I'm wondering if maybe we can get these school children to take tours. First of all, maybe have someone speak to them about what the UN does and explain to them, whether they're in like 6th grade or whatever, grammar school, junior high, and then give them tours. And maybe, you know, some of the countries that they even come from, let's say Guatemala, like another country, they have a UN mission, so they maybe get a tour while they went to the United Nations afterwards. In the neighborhood, go to the Guatemalan UN. So I was wondering maybe if we can do something, because it was a very heavy lift for myself to do it. I mean, I work with UNA, but
Did you find out, they must offer tours to
they
schools?
did when I was a kid, and they do offer tours.
Yeah.
It gets complicated
Right.
because you can't just walk the kids over, you gotta hire a bus.
Right,
I mean, a whole
yeah.
thing. And I was like, just walk the kids over. I mean, you know, but you can't do that. It's a different world. So that's where I needed I don't have kids, so that's where I needed the help of like,
Understanding sort of how it works,
Yeah.
yeah.
how it works, and maybe we can do this committee and get maybe one school or 2 or 3 schools, but I just think it would help these children throughout their whole lives, and raise a great impression. I mean, I don't know how many of these kids really know how important the United Nations is and what their role is.
Right, I think that's a great program. We should absolutely have them come and talk about it, but they can take the subway. I mean, when my child was at Midtown West, we went to Yankee Stadium, we went all
Oh, you
over
can?
the city, yes, by subway. We
Midtown
rarely
West,
took the
that's
bus.
High school or?
At elementary school. that's
Oh,
the
wow.
entry. Yeah.
Ken must have started taking the subway again, too. I was very frustrated last year, they were chartering school buses, like, you know, and it was slower.
Right, right.
But there was fear of the subway, which I guess
Oh,
we still
yeah,
have,
yeah, yeah.
with our National Guard and stuff,
Right,
but,
right, yeah. Good point, right.
Who was the national
And I
guard? You walk them over.
So David, are you thinking about having someone from the UN maybe come to a upcoming committee meeting?
Well, I'd have someone,
Or-
that'd be great if I could do that. I would have someone from the United Nations Association, the New York chapter come.
Right.
Because they're more, for lack of, they're a UN buff group.
It looks like the UN has children's tours, ages 5 to 10 on Fridays. Or at other times for groups by prior arrangement. So.
I mean, I was gonna say, I know my son's public high school did a tour there, right? And they did, I can't remember, I assume they did the subway, I don't know how they got there, but so I think somebody at his high school arranged it, but it would be helpful to have somebody who could come talk to us about like, this is what's available, this is what the contact is, and maybe then we could put something together and put it on our website or something, right? But like letting schools know this is an option and pretty, you know, these are the direct steps of organizing a tour.
Sure.
Okay.
That's a nice idea.
So David, if you wanna forward that in contact to me, that'd be great.
Okay, it's in the call. Yeah, all right, I'll follow it over again.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna try to get this briefing that I got today. The Independent Budget Office provided an assessment of the preliminary budget for FY 25 for, I don't know who they sent it out to, but I was one of the many people they sent the invite to, so I attended a good 30 minutes of it, and it was very interesting, a lot of stuff on education. And obviously they differ a lot where compared to what the mayor is thinking. And so in a lot of different ways, some good, some not great. But I thought I'm gonna try to get that briefing, that deck for you guys.
Sounds great.
To look at, and, you know, I mean, if you like, take a look at it and think maybe we actually want IBO to come, to talk about, maybe just giving a perspective on budget stuff, on at least from the DOE stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah, there's a lot of budget meetings happening this month. One thing that, if folks are interested, on March 18th, there's gonna be a preliminary hearing at the city council for DOE budget. So you can stream that online, you don't have to go down there, you could also attend in person, but all of these things are gonna be discussed over the next few months as we lead up to the budget adoption at the end of June. But yeah, having that, I think, would be super helpful.
Yeah.
If there's like a deck,
Yeah,
maybe we can think about,
I
yeah,
hope that
inviting
they
someone.
would share it. I mean, it was through the civic.
Yeah.
I think it was routed through the Civic Engagement Commission. So it's always weird how things pop up. I'm like, yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And then I suppose at some point. I mean, I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg, but, when it's looking closer to what the budget cuts are going to be for schools, or what seems to be where the biggest cuts may be, then, but that may be too late for then us to get information so that we could try and advocate for the cuts to not be so big, you know, I'm not
Yeah.
very sure where.
We just did a letter.
You guys just
We
did
did a letter last month about, and our priorities were on the 3K, pre-K cuts, social service workers, and after-school programming, I believe. So we are on the record.
Good.
And that went to the mayor's office. So we have listed our priorities. We talked about the teacher shortage in that letter, which is a huge issue. That's when Gail Brewer came in and she raised that issue for us to discuss, and we incorporated that into the letter. But yeah, it's a moving thing, like because as we were drafting, actually, the mayor reversed some of the things and said, oh, actually, I'm gonna put more money into the summer rising program. So we had to sort of revise that letter on the fly, and things are gonna be moving pretty quickly. So it's always hard to write the letter.
Exactly.
But I think, we are on the record for some of those major priorities,
Good.
but we should keep following this to see what else may come in the next few months. And if we should go, we should do something together.
Leslie has her hand up too.
Leslie,
Can we, on Monday, the 18th at 10 o'clock, the Education Committee for City Council is going to hear on, I think the budget in general, but specifically cuts to 3K and pre-K. Can we furnish our letter for that testimony? Or Jesse, is that automatically just kind of, is that where I don't remember who we addressed the letter to.
I mean, it's not automatic. No, so a hearing is a clean slate. So if we want to submit that letter as testimony, if that's what we'd like to do, then that's fine. We're on record already, so it's public information. So we can certainly just resubmit that letter as testimony.
Do we need to take a vote for that, or?
No.
Awesome, that's great.
I mean, you can if you want, but if you all collectively feel it's okay. Yeah, it's like I said, we already voted on the letter, and the letter's public knowledge, our choice of sending it.
Good point, Leslie, thank you.
Yeah.
Super good.
All right, anything else?
I have a speech I'd like to write, to read as a community member about night shift. So,
Well, I know that we had the 2 minutes earlier, right, that.
well, I mean,
nobody's
we've
spoke,
been,
but-
you've been suppressing our voice for 12 months, so I would hope to have whatever it takes to read this. Welcoming, dear friends and neighbors, quid bono, who stands or stood to gain from a crime and so might have been responsible for it? In law, it has been a maxim that bad facts make bad law. Every lawyer knows that. That is what happens when the government will seek the worst case to expand the law and apply it to others. This legal maxim is certainly not new. Just this morning at 11:30 a.m., I put resident organizational flyers in my building lobby. I walked around the block, re-entered my lobby 5 minutes later, and half the flyers were ripped down from my lobby. I asked the residents who were warming themselves in my lobby what happened to the flyers. They said housing came in and ripped them down, and they told housing to stop because they're resident organization flyers, and chased management away, leaving half the flyers up. Of course, they're all gone now later tonight. This type of malicious illegal activity has been rampant by housing management for 12 months. Residents have been physically assaulted by housing management for exercising their rights. Many reports have been made. How can CB4 representatives not see this as a red flag? How can CB4 representatives pretend to be for democracy when the board continuance of this proposed fraud says otherwise? Why are some CB4 reps willfully blind to violations of tenants' rights? The CB4 think it's all right to violate citizens' rights. Now we have Joe on the CB4 who thinks he's smarter than Mayor LaGuardia pulling out financial spreadsheets last meeting as if he is an agent for related companies and international banks trying to sell the benefit of stripping all the assets of NYCHA properties. I'm very familiar with spreadsheets. My resume includes a couple decades as a licensed financial representative. Joe hastily proposes fully mortgaging the properties after raising the rents from affordable to medium income and luxury to make it lucrative for banks to offer huge mortgages on entire property to fully leverage all assets, giving ownership of NYCHA properties to international banks. No surprise here, Joe himself is a compromised housing developer who looks to score business deals. In turn, related to foreign golden visa holder investors will be paid from this mortgage. Frequently, these asset strippers just declare bankruptcy and bounce after the strip. History is full of these crimes of opportunity. Let's all wake up, please. None of this helps the stability of historic New York City Midtown modern high-rise community. Everyone sees it. Now, many more locals are starting to speak up. Who among us has the resilience to stop this evil proposition? One does not destroy their neighbor's house to build their own. Please join the residents of Elliott, Chelsea, Fulton houses, neighbors, and home occupiers. Red flags are pasted up all over this project for related companies, a group of all foreign investors, to usurp American public housing properties in a malicious attempt to destabilize American citizens from multi-generational communities and turn them into refugees in their own country. This human trafficking project is dead on the table. Shame on those who proposed and propagated such an idea on American soil. And we have CB4 members playing dirty politics with community residents, such as after Cesar, a resident, said he is not in support of a private hotel on a Hudson Riverfront water public access park proposed by Lowell Kern, a CB4 member, is witness to have said he will vote to destabilize NYCHA because now he does not like Cesar. Not to mention that Jeffrey LaFrance, a CB4 member, installed Elliott Chelsea House's current tenant association president, Darlene Waters, when Jeffrey was employed at Gottfried's office. The residents did not vote for Darlene Waters, and her voice represents that of Jeffrey LaFrance's friends, shockingly not the residents. Please support us, friends and neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second?
I second that.
Thank you, Leslie.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Jesse.